When I joined Lumtech in 2012, I was 25, ambitious, and burnt out from 3 years at a chaotic startup where nothing made sense and everything was on fire, both figuratively and literally. I needed structure, I needed mentorship, and I needed a place where I could build a career, not just survive. Lumtech was that place. Or at least, it seemed that way back then. I started in the data analytics division. It was a medium-sized department back then, one of the fastest-growing teams in the company. My manager, Helena, was efficient but cold, the type who only acknowledged your existence when KPIs weren't met. She didn't care that I was new. She cared that I didn't yet know the full back-end structure of a proprietary system I'd only just gotten access to. I was drowning in documentation and deadlines. That's when I met Derek. Derek was a senior manager 2 levels above me, in charge of cross-team project integration. The first time I saw him, he was tearing into a vendor during a budget meeting, calm but terrifyingly direct. Later that day, he stopped by my desk. I braced myself, thinking he'd point out an error in one of the reports I'd sent in. Instead, he asked if I wanted to sit in on his next planning session. "I've been where you are," he said, eyes scanning the disaster of post-its and highlighters on my desk. "It gets easier. I'll walk you through the parts that matter." Derek was 41 at the time. Tall, sharp suits, and carried himself like he was always 5 steps ahead of everyone in the room. People listened when he spoke. That kind of presence. He started mentoring me informally, inviting me to high-level meetings, pulling me into projects I had no business being on, but always backing me up when others raised eyebrows. With him, I began to understand how the system worked, not the software, but the people. The office politics. The agendas. 6 months in, I was getting lunch from the taco truck across the street when he joined me. Casual, like it wasn't a weird thing for a manager to sit next to a junior analyst in the cold, unzipping his coat while biting into a chorizo burrito. "I read your code audit from last week. You spotted a structural flaw in how the team's logging sessions. That's good work, Lauren." Very few people catch that. I tried to play it cool. I thanked him. He nodded, chewed, and then said, "You ever think of moving up?" Eventually, I said. "I guess I still feel like I'm catching up." He looked at me in that way that meant he already knew what I was going to say. "Don't wait too long. They'll let you sit in the shallow end forever if you let them." That conversation stuck with me. 3 months later, he invited me to a conference in Seattle. Corporate needs someone from analytics to sit on the panel. "You've got the best read on user behavior across platforms." It was technically above my pay grade. HR said I couldn't expense the trip unless I was an official speaker. Derek pulled some strings. I went. That trip was the turning point. After our presentation, we grabbed drinks with some of the vendor reps, then wandered the rainy streets downtown. At some point, we were standing under a bridge, huddled together to avoid the wind, and he said something like, "You know, I spend a lot of time thinking about you." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what he meant, or maybe I did and I didn't want to acknowledge it. But when he reached for my hand, I didn't stop him. We kept it quiet at first. Not secret, but discreet. I wasn't sure what it was. He was mentoring me, yes, but now also kissing me in his car after late meetings, bringing me coffee with my name spelled right, listening to me vent about the job and my strained relationship with my sister. He never pushed me to make it official, never cornered me emotionally. He let it happen naturally. Which, in hindsight, was its own kind of manipulation. Our first real fight happened about 10 months in over a promotion. A director-level position opened up in our department. I thought I had a shot, but the role went to Aisha Patel, a woman with 10 years more experience who I liked and respected. Still, I couldn't help feeling bitter. Derek had been on the promotion panel. "You could have advocated for me," I said after the announcement. "You know what I've done." He looked at me like I'd said something naive. "It's not just about what you've done. It's about what the optics look like. You and I, if anyone thought there was bias." "So what, I'm disqualified because I'm sleeping with you?" "No," he said quietly. "You're not disqualified. But you're under a different kind of scrutiny now." I didn't talk to him for 3 days. When he came by my apartment, I almost didn't open the door. But he stood there in the rain-soaked, holding a bag of Thai food and saying he was sorry, that he didn't handle it well, that he should have fought harder. I let him in. That night, I told him I loved him. He said it back. After that, things escalated. We started living together the next spring. I moved into his condo on Lakeview, sleek, expensive, minimalist. I brought in my chaos, my plants, my warm light, and shelves of books. He adjusted. I did too. We talked about merging finances. We didn't yet, but it was on the table. At work, our relationship wasn't exactly a secret anymore. Most people were professional about it. A few weren't. Helena, my original manager, seemed especially cold. At a team offsite in Denver, I overheard her telling someone, "Lauren always lands on her feet, doesn't she? Wonder why that is." I told Derek. He shrugged. People talk. Let them. It was around then that I noticed changes in him. Subtle at first. A delayed reply here, a forgotten promise there. He missed my birthday dinner because of a board call that ran long. He stopped asking about my day, not because he didn't care, he still did in his way, but because I think he'd gotten used to me being there. We'd slipped into that stage where comfort becomes complacency. Still, we moved forward. The wedding wasn't big, just 40 people, a garden ceremony in Evanston. My sister flew in from Portland, gave a stiff but sweet toast. Derek's parents came in from Boston, all pearls and tailored suits. I remember looking at him during our vows and thinking, this is safe. This is smart. This is solid. I didn't know then what I was setting in motion. After the wedding, everything looked stable from the outside. We were the classic upwardly mobile couple, two polished professionals in tech, stylish condo, joint vacations to Vancouver and Napa, Sunday brunches at places with $8 lattes. But from the inside, the texture of our relationship started to shift almost immediately. It wasn't one huge moment. It was the way Derek used money as a silent steering wheel, always just beneath the surface, guiding where we went, how we lived, and how we talked about the future. At the time, he was pulling in around $230,000 a year, plus quarterly bonuses. I was doing well, $120,000 and moving steadily upward, but the difference mattered more than I thought it would. Derek liked to joke about it. That was his thing, smooth control dressed as humor. Marrying you was a good investment, he said once while pouring wine at a dinner party. I get love and a tax break. I laughed because everyone else did. Even though the statement made my skin tighten. He chose our restaurants. Always. Places with dress codes and wine pairings. If I suggested somewhere more casual, like a Korean barbecue spot I loved, he'd say, that's cute, but I had a heavy week. Let's go somewhere with linen napkins. It was said lightly, but I learned fast not to press. When we traveled, he booked the hotels. He preferred boutique luxury, which meant places with $500 in night rooms and handwritten welcome notes. I paid for dinners, sometimes coffees, small things. But the big bills were his territory. You don't need to worry about it, he said once when I offered to split the cost of our anniversary trip to Tulum. It's my treat. I like spoiling you. I started noticing how uncomfortable it made me feel when he said, spoiling. I didn't want to be spoiled. I wanted to be equal. But I didn't say anything then. I was too focused on growing at Lumtech. A month after the honeymoon, I was assigned to a new cross-departmental initiative called Orion. It was a huge deal. Basically, we were redesigning the entire data infrastructure for our European division. I was one of only 6 people pulled in. One of them was Avery Conrad, a senior product strategist from Toronto who just transferred to the Chicago office. Avery was intimidating in the best way, brilliant, no nonsense, and exactly the kind of woman who made Derek uneasy. She didn't defer to him in meetings. She called him out once in front of the VP of strategy for glossing over an error in timeline planning. Afterward, in the elevator, Derek was quiet. He didn't say anything until we got to our floor. She's loud, he said finally. She's right, I said. She's also new. That was the first time I realized he didn't like being challenged by women who weren't his women. Derek was supportive of Orion at first. He called it my career rocket. But support became surveillance. He started asking who I worked with most closely. When I mentioned Avery a few too many times, he raised an eyebrow. You sure she's not gunning for your job? She's on my side, I said. It's not like that. He nodded, but his expression didn't change. That winter, Derek got a raise and a promotion, Director of North American Operations. The bump was big. His income jumped to over $275,000, with stock options that made our savings look like a rounding error. He bought a new car, a black Audi A7. I suggested we talk about joint investments or a mutual account for long-term goals. Let's just keep things simple for now, he said. You keep your accounts. I keep mine. What's mine is yours when you need it. Except it wasn't. By March, things were tense. He started making comments I couldn't laugh off. When I offered to cover groceries one weekend, he said, don't worry, babe. Your money's better spent on dresses and happy hours. Another time, I mentioned wanting to put more into my 401k, and he smiled and said, that's cute. You planning to retire before me? I stopped trying to talk finances after that. It got worse when my younger brother, Theo, lost his job. He was 28, worked in hospitality, and got laid off from a hotel chain during a restructuring. I offered to help him out temporarily, just $800 to cover rent until his unemployment kicked in. I told Derek over breakfast. He didn't even look up from his phone. You're not a bank. It's my money, I said carefully. And he's my brother. He's also not your responsibility. You think I give my sister cash every time she screws up. I Venmo'd Theo anyway. Derek didn't say anything. But the next week, I got home to find the credit card I used for groceries had been canceled. When I asked why, he said, we don't need 3 cards floating around. It's inefficient. He'd been paying off that card. It was under his name, but I used it for shared expenses. Without it, I had to front everything on my own card, which had a lower limit. Suddenly, my checking account was running dry halfway through the month. I checked our budgeting sheet. He'd removed my editing access. I handle most of it anyway, he said when I brought it up. I'm not trying to micromanage you. But he was. And I let him. At work, Orion exploded into a massive success. Our proposed framework was adopted across all global offices. I was asked to lead the rollout phase. I started getting emails from leadership asking about my long-term goals. I worked late most nights. Derek started waiting up for me. But not to be sweet, he was collecting intel. You're at the office till 10 p.m. again, he'd say. Anyone else staying late? Avery. When I said yes, he smiled without warmth. Of course she is. In April, we had a blow-up fight. The kind that comes out of nowhere and ends with one person sleeping on the couch. It started when I got home from a networking event and mentioned that a recruiter from another company had approached me. They're opening a new office here, I said. They're looking for someone to lead analytics. The comp's great. He looked at me like I told him I was moving to Jupiter. You're not going to take it. Why not? Because you're not ready. You've got a good track here, and let's be honest, you're not exactly underpaid. I laughed. I'm not exactly overpaid either. He crossed his arms. You want to leave Lumtech? After everything I've done for your career. That shut me up. Because he wasn't wrong. But he wasn't right either. I didn't take the offer. I said no the next day. Things got quiet after that. A month later, my cousin Sienna came to visit. She stayed with us for a weekend. Derek was polite, distant. On her last night, we were on the balcony drinking wine and she asked quietly, is he always like this? Like what? Careful. Controlled. Like he's letting you exist. I didn't answer. In July, Avery got promoted. She invited me out for celebratory drinks. I hesitated before accepting. Derek was out of town at a leadership summit in San Diego. I figured he'd never know. The next morning he called. How was the bar? I froze. How do you? You posted a selfie in your story. I saw who was tagged. That night, when he got home, he didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just handed me a neatly printed Excel sheet. Let's talk about our expenses, he said. He'd created a detailed breakdown of everything we'd spent over the past year. Every shared cost. Every item I'd paid for versus what he had. The imbalance was clear and skewed heavily in his favor. I don't want to make this a thing, he said. But maybe we should revisit how we split things. So it's more aligned with what we each bring in. That was the moment it hit me. He didn't see us as equal partners. He saw us as a ledger. A cost-benefit analysis. I didn't say anything. I took the sheet. I nodded. I went to the bedroom and sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for 20 minutes. At work, I kept climbing. I got a seat at the quarterly strategy table. I began leading more inter-office briefings. People respected me. They deferred to me. But at home, I was shrinking. Money became a shadow in every conversation. I hesitated before buying a new laptop. I stopped ordering takeout unless he suggested it. I tracked every dollar. I waited for the other shoe to drop. One night, I made pasta from scratch. A small thing. Just me trying to feel normal. Derek came home, looked at the table and said, you didn't have to try so hard. You know I prefer Italian at Trivola. I put the plates away without touching them. He never noticed. When I was offered the Director of Product Analytics position, I was in a glass-walled conference room on the 32nd floor of the Lumtech Tower. Marlene, the VP of Strategic Development, slid the offer letter across the table like she was handing me keys to another life. $260,000 base. Performance bonuses up to 20%. Full relocation flexibility if needed in the future, she said. You've earned this. I stared at the number for a full 5 seconds before I said anything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just said, thank you. I won't let you down. The words didn't feel like mine. They felt like a line I'd been waiting 10 years to deliver. The position meant I'd be leading the entire analytics wing for North America, managing 4 regional teams, and reporting directly to the C-suite. It was a career-defining leap. And I knew, even before I left that room, that Derek wouldn't take it well. Because 6 weeks earlier, he had interviewed for the same role. And he hadn't gotten it. We didn't talk much about his interview. He came home that day tense and silent, kicked off his shoes, and poured himself a glass of scotch. It went fine, was all he said. Later, I found out from Avery, now my closest confidant at work, that his session had been rough. He'd lost composure during a technical question, then tried to dominate the panel with jargon instead of strategy. Someone from the team told her he came off as rigid and unwilling to collaborate. Honestly, Avery said, he tanked himself. They were looking for someone visionary, and he kept talking about structure and efficiency metrics. It didn't land. I didn't share that with Derek. There was no upside to rubbing it in. But the tension after that was like mold growing inside our walls. Quiet, invisible, but poisonous. When I got the offer, I waited until dinner to tell him. I made salmon and asparagus, lit a candle, trying to make it feel like something we could both celebrate. They offered me director, I said as I passed him the wine. He froze. Director. I nodded. Product analytics, $260,000 base, plus bonuses. I start in 4 weeks. He swirled the wine, stared at the candlelight through the glass. Wow, that's fast. They want to announce it at the next all hands. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't even smile. Later that night, as I was brushing my teeth, he leaned on the doorframe and said, so now I'm married to my boss's boss. I paused mid-brush. I'm not your boss. Not yet, he muttered and walked away. The next morning, he didn't speak to me at all. Things started unraveling in small, intentional acts. He stopped making the bed when he got up first. He left his dirty dishes in the sink for days. He forgot our weekly grocery list and came home with only protein shakes, steak, and some dry cereal. When I asked where the vegetables were, he said, I thought you were handling the food now that you're the high earner. He weaponized silence like a scalpel. I'd talk about strategy briefs and team reorganizations, and he'd respond with monosyllables or not at all. Once, I got home excited after closing $1 million contract with a Canadian partner. I started to tell him about it, and he cut me off with, hey, Lauren, can you not talk about work for once? I said, "You mean my work?" He didn't answer. The worst part was pretending in front of others. At the office, I was still Lauren and Derek, the power couple. People assumed we were this perfectly calibrated match. Marlene once joked at a lunch, "Must be fun to brainstorm business strategy with your husband at home, right?" I smiled. Sure. We keep it professional. Except we didn't. At home, Derek barely looked at me. When he did, it was with a weight I couldn't name. Resentment, maybe, or humiliation. New players started entering the picture. As part of my onboarding, I inherited a team from the East Coast Division. One of them, a guy named Hugo Rodriguez, was brilliant and sharp-tongued. A real operator. We clashed at first. He didn't like that a Chicago exec was calling the shots, but eventually, we earned each other's respect. Hugo started emailing me after hours with ideas. One night, Derek saw a message pop up on my laptop. "Who's Hugo?" he asked. "A director from Boston. Smart guy. He's helping with the pipeline architecture." He looked at me like I was lying. "Late-night strategy sessions?" "It was a quick note," I said. "Nothing weird." He stared at the screen, then walked away. 3 days later, he posted a smug LinkedIn update, excited to be reevaluating new leadership opportunities. Sometimes the best growth comes from discomfort. It didn't mention Lomtech. He hadn't cleared it with comms. HR pulled him into a meeting. He came home furious. "They said I breached protocol," he snapped. "For what?" "Trying to build a personal brand." "You didn't warn them," I said carefully. "You made it look like you were quitting." "I might. You'd be walking away with nothing lined up." "I'm not stupid." I didn't say anything. Because I honestly wasn't sure anymore. One night, he forgot to mute himself on a Zoom call with his team. He was ranting about upper management, called the new VP of strategy a clueless diversity hire. His mic stayed hot. Someone reported it. HR suspended him for 2 weeks. He told me it was overblown. "Just a joke," he said. "Office snowflakes." But when he came back, they stripped him of his project lead, moved him to a role under someone he used to supervise, a quiet, junior manager named Calvin Yoon. Calvin was polite, young, and fully aligned with my department. Derek took it as a slap in the face. "That kid has no spine," he raged. "They're turning the place into a kindergarten." I didn't respond. I was too tired. A week later, I got invited to keynote a conference in New York. Paid flight, luxury hotel, full schedule. Derek declined to come. Said he had better things to do than clap for a room full of analytics nerds. I went alone. After my keynote, Hugo and I grabbed drinks with a few other panelists. It was harmless, industry gossip, tech trends, who's funding what. But someone posted a group photo. I was tagged. Derek saw it. When I got home, he was already drinking. "Looked like fun," he said. "You and Hugo look cozy." "Are you serious?" "I'm just saying. He's single, right?" "You're being paranoid." "I'm being observant." That night, he slept in the guest room. I didn't ask why. Over the next month, Derek started staying out later. "Client dinners," he said. "Strategy planning offsites." But he never mentioned who with. His eyes started drifting during our conversations. I'd tell him something about an upcoming launch or a hiring decision, and he'd just nod, distracted. Then one night I found a receipt in his jacket pocket, 2 entrees, 2 drinks, at a steakhouse we used to go to. Not near his office. Not somewhere he'd take a client. I didn't ask. I just put it back. I told myself I didn't want the answer. Meanwhile, my new executive assistant, Renee, a sharp, incredibly efficient woman in her late 20s, started managing my schedule like I was royalty. She protected my time, screened requests, and knew how to read a room better than most directors I'd worked with. Derek met her once, at an office mixer. He shook her hand and said, "So you're the one running her life now?" She smiled. "Just the calendar." "Same thing." She laughed. I didn't. It all came to a head one night in late November. I'd worked a 13-hour day. There had been a systems outage in 2 regional hubs, and my team had stayed late to troubleshoot. I got home at 9:30. The lights were off. Derek was on the balcony, smoking, something he hadn't done in 5 years. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. "You okay?" He didn't look at me. "Do you even see me anymore?" "What are you talking about?" "I used to be the one people respected," he said. "Now I'm the punchline in every room you walk into." "I don't see you that way." "You don't have to. Everyone else does. And you let it happen." That was the first time he ever made me feel guilty for being good at something. I went back inside. He stayed out there until midnight. 2 days later, he called in sick. Then again the next week. HR scheduled a wellness check. I found the notice on the fridge. And just like that, my house stopped feeling like a home. It was December when I heard the first rumor. We were in the elevator at work. Just me and one of the senior engineers from infrastructure, Paul Trand, someone I didn't talk to often but had always been cordial with. As the elevator dinged to the 20th floor, he turned and said, "Hey, just for the record, I know you didn't get that promotion because of some policy crap." I blinked. "What?" "You know, the diversity push. A couple of people have been talking about how the company's fast-tracking women and checking boxes. Total bullshit, obviously." I didn't know what to say. I thanked him, then got off 2 floors early and took the stairs the rest of the way. My hands were shaking. That night, I asked Renee if she'd heard anything similar. She hesitated. "You want me to be honest?" "Always. There's been a weird tone since your promotion. Especially from people who used to report to Derek. Some of them think you jumped the line. Did someone say that directly? Not in front of me. But I overheard Marcus Chen say something in the break room. Something like, well, it helps when HR is trying to balance their optics. Marcus was one of Derek's guys. Loyal, technically strong, and quiet, but apparently not above repeating garbage in private. I went home that night numb. Derek wasn't there. I knew better than to expect him by then. He came in around 11, dropped his keys loudly on the kitchen counter, and started rummaging through the fridge. Did you say something to Marcus Chen? I asked. He didn't look up. What? He made a comment. About my promotion being a diversity win. Oh, that. He shut the fridge and grabbed a beer. People talk. Why would he say that? He shrugged. Maybe he's not wrong. The room went dead quiet. I earned this, Derek. He cracked the bottle open. Sure. But let's not pretend the company isn't all about headlines now. Woman of color leading analytics? Makes a great story. I walked out of the kitchen before I could say something I'd regret. In our bedroom, I locked the door for the first time in our marriage. 2 days later, my bank app pinged me with a fraud warning. I logged in and saw a $16,000 transfer from our shared savings account to one of Derek's personal accounts. A week later, another transfer for $14,500. I hadn't authorized either. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. It's our money, he said, not looking up from his phone. I needed to move it. For what? Liquidity. You emptied the emergency fund. We'll build it back. You didn't even tell me. He shrugged. You're the one with the big job now. I called the bank. Legally, I couldn't reverse the transfers. His name was on the account too. After that, I pulled all my direct deposits into a separate account he didn't have access to. Quietly. I didn't tell him. I was done being surprised. That same week, I came home late from a team dinner to find a note taped to the microwave. Since you're the boss now, I figured you'd want to delegate dinner. The kitchen was a mess. Sink full. Food wrappers on the floor. I went to bed without eating. He came in around 3 a.m., the smell of whiskey trailing him like a storm cloud. Over the next few weeks, the notes multiplied. Don't worry about the laundry, the house doesn't need to impress investors. Trash still full. Guess that's above your pay grade now. Ran out of toothpaste. Thought the woman making $260,000 would notice. He barely spoke to me in person, but he had plenty to say through Sharpie and printer paper. It was psychological warfare via passive aggression. Meanwhile at work, I was managing chaos. One of our teams in Montreal was under audit. Another had a rogue developer leak beta code to a startup. I was doing 12-hour days, managing legal fallout, vendor relations, team morale. I was doing Derek's job and mine. And every night, I came home to a man who looked at me like I was a stain on his reputation. Then came the Christmas party. Corporate went all out. Fancy rooftop venue, live music, signature cocktails. It was supposed to be our first public appearance since my promotion. I wore a navy silk jumpsuit. Derek wore a scowl. We barely made it through the first hour before I found him at the bar with Marcus Chen and Greg Bloom, another one of his old team leads. They were laughing at something. As I approached, Greg said, "Hey Lauren. We were just talking about your fast track to executive land. Must be nice." Derek didn't say anything. He just sipped his drink, watching me. "What exactly is funny about it?" I asked. "Nothing," Greg said, smirking. "Just impressed by how fast the company moves these days." I looked straight at Derek. "You want to tell them I worked for a decade on this? Or should I?" He said nothing. That silence hurt more than any insult could have. After that, things collapsed fast. He stopped doing anything at home. No cooking, no cleaning, not even basic hygiene. Dirty laundry piled up in corners. Trash overflowed. Our bedroom smelled like mildew and stale beer. One night, I came home to find him playing video games at full volume with noise-canceling headphones on. Empty pizza boxes, ashtray full, a single wine glass on the floor, my wine glass. He didn't hear me walk in. I watched him for 10 minutes. He never looked up. I started sleeping in the guest room. Then the weirdest thing happened. I started getting messages on LinkedIn from people I didn't know, people in the industry, some random, some mutuals. Things like, "Hey, I heard some weird stuff about how you got promoted. Hope it's just jealousy. Wow, didn't know Lumtech was playing the optics game. Still, congrats. Saw that thread on Blind. Sorry people suck." I logged onto Blind, an anonymous workplace forum, and found a thread titled, "When DEI Wins Over Actual Experience." The top comment was, "Our new director of analytics didn't even have 10 years of management. But hey, she's diverse, so." Replies were even worse. Specific. Personal. Someone mentioned my keynote. Someone else mentioned the department I used to lead. One comment ended with, "Funny how she married into a seat at the table." It didn't take a genius to figure out who had started it. I printed the thread. Showed it to HR. They said they'd investigate. They couldn't prove it was Derek, but I could. His phrasing was all over it. The tone, the references, even the way he formatted bullets. They didn't fire him. They just let him fade out. Over the next month, his responsibilities were stripped. His team reassigned. Eventually, he stopped showing up altogether. But the damage was done. I started losing sleep. My appetite vanished. I had to force myself to stay present in meetings. Avery noticed first. You look like hell, she said bluntly. Thanks. Seriously. Is he making your life harder? I didn't answer. That weekend, I returned home from a grocery run to find Derek had thrown away my work laptop. Not hidden. Thrown away. Into a trash bag with banana peels and coffee grounds. It was half buried in the kitchen bin. When I pulled it out, he was watching TV. You threw away my computer. He didn't even flinch. It was in the way. You know it's company property, right? That I can't even touch the hard drive without authorization. He muted the TV. Then maybe you shouldn't leave your stuff everywhere. That night, I locked my office door. I started backing up everything I could. All my files. All my notes. Even my emails. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure. I didn't trust my husband anymore. The day I filed for divorce, I didn't cry. I didn't even hesitate. I walked into the office of Catherine Liu, one of the most respected family law attorneys in Chicago, and signed the paperwork with a pen she handed me without a word. Catherine had already reviewed our prenuptial agreement, which Derek had insisted on back when he was the one making twice my income. At the time, I hadn't argued. His money felt like something separate, and I hadn't cared about ownership. Ironically, that same agreement would now save me from losing a cent of what I had built. I remember looking at Catherine and asking quietly, "He doesn't get anything, does he?" She flipped the folder shut and said flatly, "No. He gets nothing but his own mess." The next 72 hours were a blur of logistics. I changed the locks, froze our joint account, redirected all my mail to my office, and filed a formal incident report with Lumtech HR detailing the harassment, the sabotage, and the slander. They'd been sitting on complaints already. My report just connected the dots. Within a week, Derek's badge access was disabled, and his name vanished from the internal directory like he'd never existed. Avery found me that morning outside the HR suite. "He's gone," she said. I nodded. "I know." She hesitated. "You want to talk about it?" "No," I said. "I want to get back to work." It wasn't pride. It was survival. News traveled fast. The internal rumor mill spun like a centrifuge. Some employees were shocked. Others weren't. Several lower-level team members came forward after Derek's dismissal with their own stories, comments he'd made in meetings, snide remarks during performance reviews, inappropriate jokes about diversity hires and nepotism. One even had a recording. HR compiled everything. By the end of the month, Lumtech made a quiet announcement in an all-staff memo. Due to recent internal restructuring, Derek Hallberg will no longer be with the company. No further comment. No farewell. His LinkedIn account was deactivated by that Friday. When someone reposted a screenshot of his old post about growth through discomfort, it went viral online with the caption, "Guess that discomfort caught up with him." I didn't smile. But I didn't feel bad either. My divorce proceedings moved fast. Catherine was a machine. Derek tried to contest one clause about asset protection, but he didn't have a leg to stand on. The prenup had been drafted by his lawyer, ironclad, explicit. No alimony. No claim on my property or earnings. The house was in my name. The car was leased under mine. Every account he had access to had been closed. When the judgment came down in March, it was clean, surgical, and final. Derek didn't even show up to the last hearing. His lawyer said he was unavailable due to professional disruption. Translation, he couldn't find another job. I started getting calls from industry friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. One from Vanessa Liu, a director at Plaxton Metrics. "We passed on Derek," she said. "Too much smoke." Another from Jeremy Shin, who ran hiring at a fintech startup. Someone flagged his name as a reputation risk. Wasn't worth it. His name had become toxic. He tried freelancing, but nothing stuck. One former colleague told me Derek reached out asking for introductions and was turned down by 5 people in a row. He called it a market freeze. The truth was simpler. Nobody wanted to hire the guy who slandered his wife and nuked his own department on the way out. Meanwhile, I was flying. With Derek gone, my work focus sharpened to something even I didn't recognize. I was sleeping better. Eating again. Ideas came faster. I took over 2 major global projects that had been languishing in mid-tier management, cut their turnaround times in half, and presented a restructured model that saved the company's $7.8 million in Q2 alone. In April, I was asked to speak at a private strategy roundtable with executive leadership. There were maybe 12 of us in that room, VPs, senior architects, and the CTO. Midway through my presentation on user behavior analytics and prediction metrics, I saw the CEO, Anand Rajan, scribble something in his notebook and glance up with a faint smile. 3 days later, I got a calendar invite for a 9:30 a.m. meeting titled simply, Strategy Realignment Proposal Discussion, Private. I showed up in a blazer I hadn't worn since the promotion to director, wondering if this was about another global rollout. Instead, it was Anand and Marlene, seated on either side of a glass table, waiting with folders. Anand opened his. "We're offering you VP of Product Strategy," he said, skipping the preamble. "Base salary is $410,000. Bonuses are performance-based, equity included, and your org headcount will triple. We want you leading innovation across divisions, not just analytics." I didn't speak right away. Marlene smiled. "You've earned this." Anand leaned forward. "We'll announce at next quarter's leadership summit." I nodded. "Yes, I accept." After I left the room, I sat in the hallway for a minute just breathing. Then I called Avery. "You're not going to believe this." When the announcement went public, the reaction was immediate and divided. Half the company applauded. The other half looked like they'd just learned their ex had won the lottery. Comments flew in every direction. Old skeptics fell suspiciously silent. I watched it all from a distance. I didn't respond. I didn't post about it. I just kept moving. At the office, I became the power player. My new EA, Simone Lattimore, recruited from an executive firm in New York, ran my calendar with military precision. She had a policy: no one gets 10 minutes unless they earn it. The results were immediate. My calendar cleared. My time focused. My department's productivity jumped by 18% in 6 weeks. I brought in 2 new senior directors, Tessa Anwar, a fearless strategist from a competing firm, and Milan Varga, a data specialist from Berlin who developed the multi-layered behavior clustering system I'd studied for months. Together, we built a prototype for an internal AI platform that would eventually become the foundation for Lumteka's biggest product launch in 5 years. Meanwhile, Derek spiraled further. One evening, I got a message from Renee, now leading her own project group, who'd seen his name pop up in a Slack channel at a third-party contractor. He'd applied for a low-level analytics role under a fake name and was caught during onboarding when someone recognized his voice on an intro call. Another time, I found a handwritten letter in my office mailbox. No return address. No envelope. Just a folded sheet of paper. Hope it was worth it. You climbed over my body to get there. I turned it over to security. The cameras caught nothing. HR filed a report. That was it. But I knew who it was. I didn't reply. In July, I received the company's Leadership Excellence Award at the Global Summit in Vancouver. I stood on stage in front of 1,000 employees, lights on my face, clapping echoing in my ears, and delivered a 5-minute speech about perseverance, innovation, and the cost of silence. I didn't mention Derek. But everyone knew. Afterward, Marlene hugged me backstage. I always knew you had it, she said. But damn, Lauren. You bulldozed the mountain. That night, I sat in my hotel room, staring out at the lights on the harbor, and opened a folder Simone had handed me earlier, a stack of offers from other companies. Amazon, Meta, Salesforce, all VP or SVP positions, bigger budgets, global teams. I didn't even feel tempted, because I wasn't done yet. I still had more to build. I thought he was finished. I really did. After the divorce, the firing, and the collapse of his reputation, I assumed Derek would quietly disappear, move to another state, change careers, do what people do when they've burned every bridge. But Derek didn't fade. He pivoted. It started with an email. Not to me. One of my direct reports, Milan Varga, received it. Subject line: collaboration inquiry from industry peer. Inside was a brief pitch about a proposed analytics framework based on early product design insights shared with Lauren Hallberg during her mentorship phase. Lauren Hallberg. My married name, a name I hadn't used professionally in over a year. But he was using it. And apparently, he was referring to me as a mentor. Milan forwarded it to me with a single line: "Do you know this guy?" I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. He was trying to piggyback off my credibility. Again. I pulled the email metadata, traced it to a Gmail account under the name D. Henley. I knew the alias. He'd used it before in some amateur consulting he tried during the collapse. I forwarded everything to HR, and then to my lawyer, Catherine Liu. Catherine called me within the hour. "He's crossed the line," she said. "This isn't workplace misconduct. It's identity misuse, false representation, and defamation if you want to push it." I want to push it. She got to work. 2 days later, I heard from another former colleague, Priya Nand. She now worked at a nonprofit tech incubator in San Francisco. "We received a grant application from someone named Derek Hallberg," she said. "He listed you as a mentor and past manager. Claimed he worked with you on a predictive behavior model." I laughed out loud. "He was never part of that project. He attached a modified copy of your resume. Said he helped build the behavioral clustering framework you presented at the Vancouver Summit." I had her send it. It was my resume, but altered. The project language was identical, except he'd added his name to the core design credits and changed the dates. He even bolded mentored by Lauren Hallberg as a credential. Priya added, "We flagged it. He won't be moving forward." I filed a cease and desist the next morning. Catherine drafted it with surgical precision. Legal references, digital evidence, a printed copy of my original resume, and sworn declarations from 3 members of my project team. Milan, Avery, and Simone signed within hours. HR added their internal documentation. We also submitted a formal complaint to the Association of Digital Product Leaders, ADPL, where Derek still had a lingering profile. That's when the real fallout started. The ADPL had an annual conference coming up in Miami. It was invite-only, and one of the speakers, a former CTO named Gideon Wells, was apparently in touch with Derek, who was trying to attend as an independent consultant in collaboration with former VP Lauren Hallberg. They reached out to verify. I didn't respond directly. I had Catherine's team do it. They sent a certified affidavit confirming I had no current or previous consulting relationship with Derek, and included his recent misrepresentations. ADPL responded by stripping him of his membership. Quietly, but publicly. His name was removed from the event site within 24 hours. From there, it snowballed. He'd been applying to smaller firms under aliases and variations: D. Hallberg, Dan Henrik, Derek H., even listing fictional companies on his CV. I was notified by at least 5 organizations, most of whom found the inconsistencies and followed up with me directly. One even found a fake email account claiming to be me, written to endorse him for a grant at a Montreal tech accelerator. That was the last straw. We subpoenaed the email logs. The message was traced to his IP address. I pressed charges. The formal complaint listed digital impersonation, fraudulent use of a professional reference, and falsification of credentials. He wasn't arrested, but a civil suit was opened. He was served in person at a shared co-working space on North Clark Street. One of Simone's contacts from Legal Ops sent me a photo of the moment, taken from outside the glass wall. He looked exactly like I remembered, except smaller. Paler. Like something had drained the air out of him. After the subpoena became public record, a flood of blocks followed. A partner group in Vancouver he'd approached for startup funding issued a formal disqualification and included his name on an internal blacklist. The Chicago Product Forum removed his access badge. One of the startup incubators he tried to join, Bricks Labs, posted an open letter on their blog. We will not tolerate dishonesty, impersonation, or falsified collaborations, especially those exploiting women's achievements. Mr. Hallberg's behavior is permanently disqualifying. I didn't ask for that, but I appreciated it. Weeks later, I found out he tried to speak on a leadership recovery panel hosted by a private coaching network called Elevate Plus. He pitched himself as a fallen executive rebuilding with integrity. He submitted my name again as a former peer witness to his transformation. They called me directly. I told them the truth. They pulled the panel. His name never appeared in their materials. I didn't see Derek again, not in person. But I heard from his sister. Unexpectedly. Her name was Dana, and we'd never been close, but she reached out via email in May. Short message. Plain subject line. You should know he's unraveling. I didn't answer. A week later, a final letter arrived. Handwritten. Left at the security desk in my building, inside a white envelope with no return name. I never meant for things to go this far. I just wanted a second chance. You could have helped. You chose not to. I hope you enjoy the throne. I gave it to Catherine. She shook her head, tucked it into the legal file and said, he's going to disappear eventually. This is what they do when they know it's over. And it was. By June, there wasn't a single professional organization in our sector that hadn't heard about Derek. His name triggered warnings in applicant tracking systems. My lawyer confirmed at least 3 background check services had flagged his alias activity as employment risk. He was done. No one returned his calls. No one believed his emails. He tried to file a counterclaim, said I had ruined his career through vindictive action. The judge dismissed it without hearing. The evidence was overwhelming. My name was cleared. His was erased. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt released. Free. Finally. I didn't expect to become a speaker. The first time it happened, it wasn't some planned moment of arrival. I was invited to give a short talk at the Midwest Women in Tech Leadership Summit, just 10 minutes, an end-of-day slot that most people use to check their phones or get in line for wine. I nearly declined. But Avery nudged me. You've got a story, she said. And people want to hear it. So I stood on a modest stage at a Hilton ballroom in Milwaukee in front of maybe 80 people, most of them half listening, and I started with, I used to think that surviving in tech meant being quiet and polite. I was wrong. People looked up. By the time I finished, there were phones filming, a few silent tears, and 3 women waiting to speak to me afterward. One said, I've never heard someone say what I've been feeling for 5 years. Another, how did you survive it without breaking? That word, survive, stuck with me. That night, my inbox flooded. Requests to speak at corporate panels, student leadership groups, VC mentorship breakfasts. I said yes to all of it. Not because I needed the exposure. I didn't. I said yes because I remembered what it felt like to be silent and small in rooms full of men who expected me to stay in the corner. Within 6 months, I was speaking at Google's Executive Leadership Forum, hosting strategy talks at Salesforce, sitting on a panel at South by Southwest alongside founders who had IPO'd companies before turning 35. My face appeared in a Forbes Women in Tech profile. Simone started handling requests full-time, filtering the serious from the opportunistic. That's how I ended up on stage at the Chicago Future Front Conference that fall, just 2 miles from where I'd lived with Derek during the worst year of my life. The auditorium was full. I wore a dark maroon suit, hair pinned back, notes untouched. I didn't need them. I told the story of building in silence, of fighting behind closed doors, of being the only woman in rooms where decisions were made. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. At the end, I said, the truth is I didn't just survive the storm. I built the plane while flying through it. Standing ovation. Afterward, as I stepped off stage, a woman in a sleek black suit approached me. Mid-40s, Indian American, confident but warm. Lauren, she said, extending a hand. I'm Anita Kapoor, Chief Strategy Officer at Avalise Technologies. I've been following your work for a while. I knew Avalise. Everyone did. A global platform company that had quietly acquired 4 analytics firms in the past year. Industry whispers said they were preparing a massive expansion. We're building something, Anita said. We need someone who can architect our product evolution across 3 continents. VP level now, fast track to C-suite. The board's already approved the offer. She handed me a sealed envelope. Take your time, but not too much. We don't wait forever. I opened it in my car. Base salary, $850,000. Equity. Performance bonuses. International relocation. A personal strategy team of 35. I stared at it for a long time. Then I drove home in silence. That night, I didn't tell anyone. I just sat on my living room floor, barefoot, with a glass of wine and the lights off, listening to the quiet buzz of my apartment and the city outside my windows. I thought about everything. About the woman I was when I'd first moved in. About the battles I'd fought in these walls. About Derek's voice on the balcony saying, "Do you even see me anymore?" I saw him now. And I saw me too. Finally, fully. 2 days later, I accepted the offer. Simone handled the logistics, resignation letter, transition documents, final reports. Lumtech tried to counter. Anand called personally. "We'll match the base," he said. "Add more equity." I thanked him. I meant it. "But it's time," I said. He didn't argue. He understood. The last thing I did before leaving was pack. My office took 3 boxes. Books, awards, personal notes from teams, one signed photo of me and Avery with a scribbled "We did it, boss" in red Sharpie. At home, I kept it simple. Clothes. Files. A few pictures. And one old photo I found buried in the back of a drawer. Derek and me at our wedding. Him in a tailored suit, me in lace and disbelief. It looked like a life we'd borrowed from someone else. I almost threw it away. But then I got an idea. I found a small brown box. No bigger than a shoebox. I slipped the photo inside with a sticky note on top. Proof that I've outgrown him. I sealed it with tape and tucked it into the back of a closet in storage. Not as a memory. Not as pain. As evidence. Evidence that I survived. And that I had, finally, left the storm behind me.